Why are nursery rhymes sung by children so creepy? Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I'm a geek. You are watching Kevin the Geek. And welcome back to my latest Doctor Who review. I am continuing with Series 6 and moving on to an episode that, quite frankly, I couldn't remember anything about.
That's what we're here to find out.
This is an episode I can't remember the last time I watched this. It's quite possible I've literally only watched this once in my entire life. I just never had good memories of it. So it was quite strange re-watching it today for the purpose of this review, because I didn't know what to expect. But what I didn't expect was to love this episode.
You feeling okay?
I think so.
It really surprised me how much I love this episode. So, the main thing that I was thinking whilst watching it is how similar it is as an episode and as a concept to another episode of Doctor Who that we have already done a review for. And that was the Series 2 episode, Fear Her. And that was the one obviously set around the time of the Olympics, which has had a bit of an issue lately. In fact, it's been removed from most streaming services, that episode, because, of course, it featured some background audio from a BBC News presenter who unfortunately has been kind of arrested and things for some unsavory things, and I believe what's happening is they're planning on like re-recording that dialogue and then re-uploading it at some point, which I found interesting because, of course, when I rewatched this episode, there was another reference again in sort of background from the TV about a particular children's entertainer who, you know, again, got arrested, sent to jail for some pretty unsavory things. So that just straight away, I just found interesting that there was, that hadn't really changed, but then that other one had an influence. But that's by the by. That's just a minor thing that I just happened to think about when I was watching this episode. But I was drawing a lot of comparisons to Fear Her whilst I was watching this episode. And I think, at its very core, they're so thematically similar. We're dealing with a child who has genuine childhood fears and from genuine childhood kind of traumas. And they attempt to address them in a Doctor Who way. But this episode, I think, just storyline-wise, thematically, musically, setting-wise, in so many different ways, it was just done so much better in general. Ultimately, this episode, it kind of centers around the fear of childhood nightmares. Obviously, it focuses on this little boy called George, who, for a child actor, I thought did an incredible job. Just watching him, I could feel and sense that pure terror all the way through the episode. Whereas with Fear Her, of course, it is also kind of doing stuff with that childhood fears, and of course it focuses on Chloe, who, the unfortunate thing, I think, when she sort of has that alien inside her kind of get drawn out, the very kind of the voice that was used, that harsh whisper thing that was always going through, her name was Chloe, it detracted you from the moment, I think, Whereas here with George, you really felt the fear pretty much all the way through. And of course, they deal with the sort of the impact that those fears have on reality, you know. But I think that Night Terrors, I think it's more effective because it delves a lot deeper into some of the psychological aspects of fear and how fear can manifest itself within childhood. And of course, there was some incredible visuals with that. You know, when you see George lying in bed and he's shining his torch around, which again is a very common childhood fear, you know, that fear of the dark. I mean, I have a nephew who is 3 years old, and my sister has this special light bulb so that it will either be on or off. But then if you do it another time, it makes it sort of more like a blue light. So it's not quite dark. And it's little things like that, that for a child, when there's something that is potentially scaring them, that comfort of being able to see exactly everything around them, it makes it comforting for them. And that's why a lot of children who say they're afraid of the dark, it's not so much the dark that they're afraid of, it's what they can't see. And that really manifests itself so much in this. Like when George is shining his light around and you see all them shadows kind of appear on the wall, which of course are just simple reflections from the various toys that he has around his bedroom. Just the kind of weird shapes that is formed from shadows. It is just really, really effective in what it's trying to do. And overall, I think the atmosphere and the setting of this episode is really good because it's a very claustrophobic kind of set that they're building here. You've got this humongous block of flats, and then you've got obviously the doll's house as well, which is creepy enough in of itself. And again, with the lack of lights and everything, it just really builds on it. Whereas Fear Her, you know, being in this sunshine daily light thing, you weren't really drawn into it in the same kind of way. So again, there's a number of different things that I'm really seeing that he is just, again, we're building on what we've probably already had in Fear Her, but elevating it to a much better level. Now, of course, the Doctor was pretty good in this whole episode. You know, just his dynamic. Something that, again, I think Matt Smith's Doctor compared to David Tennant's Doctor. I love the 10th Doctor. I think he's absolutely fantastic. But I just think there's something about the way that Matt Smith is as a performer. It just lended itself that little bit better into working with a child in this particular scenario, which I really liked.
Please, Mouse, see the other stuff.
You may.
Pretty cool, eh?
Amy and Rory, of course, didn't really have a lot to do other than really running around. You know, so I'm not going to give them a high score when it comes to doing the scoring towards the end of the episode. If you knew, I score all of my Doctor Who reviews out of 10, well, out of 100 by giving 10 categories a score out of 10. That gives me my overall review. So stick around to the end of the episode to find out what score that this episode is going to get. But yeah, I think Fear Her just never really capitalized on a number of different things, whereas this really, really emphasized there. And the music is great in it. I mean, they used the nursery rhymes sung by children really effectively in this. There were definitely times that the music just felt a little bit too jolly for what it needed to be. Of course, you don't necessarily want to have it all really grim and dark all the way through, but I think it went away from it a little bit at times, but musically it just gave you that sense of just nervousness, not quite fear, I wouldn't say, but it really gave you that atmospheric feel to it, and really made it, you know, much better to integrate yourself into the darkness. pacing and narratively, I think it was just, again, really, really strong as an episode. It was quite tight, and the narrative sort of unfolded in a way that it just built that tension throughout the episode. You know, the villains, when you sort of introduced the peg dolls, they were creepy, but in a way they weren't the villains of this story. The villains, in effect, was George. Or rather, I should say, probably George's mind. Because he is bringing those fears to life. And that is a dangerous thing for children. Because children have such an immense sense of imagination. You know, the imagination of a child is unrivaled in anything else. I don't care what anyone says. You know, you'll never beat the worlds and things like that a child is able to create. They're so much better than anything that an adult can. I will not hear anything otherwise. But yeah, everything in this episode felt really subtle. I think it wasn't like truly in your face, which I think just really words. You know, like the peg dolls. Okay, as a villain, they were slow and cumbersome, and they were fine. But again, when you think about it more from you know, sort of like a manifestation of the fear, they become really, really effective. You know, it just sort of transforms the doll's house and the flat that they're living in into this really sort of nightmare, this nightmarish landscape, if you will, and makes it a really kind of core primal fear for a child. And that's what you have to keep coming back to and remembering, that this is a childhood fear. And that is why I think it's so effective. If you tried to do it that it's a fear of an adult or whatever, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work as an episode. But because you're focusing it on a child, it really, really works. And I have to say, the dad, as a supporting character, he was amazing in this.
Whatever you are, whatever you do, you're my son. And I will never, ever send you away.
Because, again, you know, I've said this a number of times on the channel that sometimes you can watch something at one point in your life. You can come back to it at a different point in your life and have a truly different perspective on it. Like when I watched Torchwood Children of Earth and I did my review of that last year, watching that as a sort of 20-year-old man, it was creepy and it was dark and it was unnerving. Coming back to it as a guy in my mid-30s, not with any children of my own, but having a nephew who at that time would have been, you know, just turned 3, I looked at that in a very, very different way. A really different way. I was able to see a lot more of like the fear that the parents were having in that episode, and like the moments when they were running after school buses saying, "Where are you taking my children?" and everything like that. I could sense that fear. And although, you know, he's my nephew, he's not my own son, I still kind of can relate to that. Because I see him so much and I do babysitting and things. And especially with the babysitting, that is how I can relate to this episode now a lot more. I mean, my nephew, I wouldn't say is especially afraid of anything. You know, he's quite an adventurous child. But there has, on just the odd 1 or 2 occasions, been, you know, I'll leave the room, you know, when he's not quite asleep. You know, I've finished doing a bedtime story. I go to turn the light off. It's like, Uncle Kev, please leave the light on. And again, you know, something as simple as that. You're just thinking, it's that fear of the unknown, of what could be waiting in the dark that you can't see. I think this episode is just so good. And the end of the episode as well, like how it all ends, it could come across quite cheesy in a way. Some people could view it in a really cheesy way. I personally think that the way it's done is brilliant. And it's similar to what they tried to do with Fear Her. You know, you've got the child, they're sort of overcoming their fears, but they still need the parental support and making sure that they feel loved and that they're always going to be there for them. Again, I just think a number of different things, like the setting, the lighting, you know, with it being like a daytime one compared to this being like dark and gritty, you know, it gives you a very different feel and a different flair for what you're looking for in this. And so I just think that the way that this was written, the way it was directed, the way it was performed by all the cast, all the additions that they made, things like the music and the ambience and the lighting and everything, I just think it came together for a really, truly satisfying episode. Something that I need to rewatch again. I can't leave it another, probably, 12 years before I watch this again. I can't forget the good stuff about this. And yes, there are nitpicks, of course. I'm always going to have nitpicks. But this episode just, for me, worked so much in a way that Fear Her didn't. This is what Fear Her wanted to be when it just needed some tweaks. And like I said, I think that this is a great episode. So I am going to give it my scores now. So like I said, there's 10 categories. Each gets a score out of 10. That gives me an overall score and therefore a grade. So these are the scores for Night Terrors. And so this episode has scored 79 marks out of 100, and that makes it a B+ episode. I didn't think it would be this high scoring before coming to sit down and watch it. I just thought it's an episode like Fear Her. It's going to be okay, but not great. But like I felt with Fear Her, when I rewatched that and I did my review of it, it is much better than I remember it. But this is so much better than I remember it. And it is a really good piece of entertainment. And it is a really good symbolism for what it is like to be a child and to just be scared. So, of course, next week, we will be going to one of the few episodes of this half of Series 6 that I actually do remember quite well. And that one is The Girl Who Waited. This is a strange series because I have watched many times over and over again the episodes that deal with the overall arcing storyline. But some of these episodes that I have barely watched and often skip over, they're the ones that are surprising me more and more. But what I do remember of The Girl Who Waited is I absolutely loved it. So it'll be interesting, has my perception of it changed since I last watched it? Which again, admittedly, is probably a couple of years since I've last seen it. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. So, of course, please do subscribe to the channel if you are new. Please do drop your comments down below. Let me know what your thoughts were for this episode. And, of course, do consider joining the Patreon where you can get early access to my content and, of course, exclusive content as well. But that is going to do it for today. So, thank you very much for watching. For now, my name's Kevin. I am a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.